Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast, episode number 72. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and, of course, author interviews. This week, I have 9 new LitRPG reviews just for you on this episode, and that includes these guys, which I'm pulling up. Travail Online, Transcend, we have On the Lost Continent, Crisis at Clearwater, LitRPG Virtual Fantasy Adventure, also A Girl in the Street Part 1, then Starter Zone, The Laboratory, a Futuristic Dungeon, The Chronicles of a PC Gamer Stuck Inside of an RPG, Book 1, The Duelist, and then we have Pangea Online, Book 1, Death and Axes, and Forest, Gaia's Rebirth, Book 1. So there you go. Those are the 9 LitRPG stories I have for you. But of course, we begin our show, though, with LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news this week, I have a couple stories for you, including that the audiobook version of Dungeon Man is the Divine Dungeon Book 2 is up for pre-order and scheduled to release October the 17th. I enjoyed the ebook version. From what I've heard, the audiobook versions are rather nice as well. Also, in LitRPG news, we have Blaze Corbin. He's announced this past week that Adventure Capital, Delvers LLC Book 3, has been set off to the editor and should be up on Amazon by about the 15th of October. So, hey, that's actually very exciting news for anybody who's a fan of the Delver series, including this guy. Okay. Also in LitRPG news, we have, this one's just fun. Daniel Schoenhofen, author of the Alpha World and Lost Horizon series, hit it out of the park this week. This last weekend, he debuted his third book in the Alpha World series called Alpha Company. We gave it a review. Got a 8 out of 10 from us, and it looks like the readers also agreed, because this past weekend when it debuted, it got all the way to number 45 on all paid Amazon and hit number 1 in several categories. So like that's really good, according to what other authors tell me, like people who do this for a living kind of stuff. And I just want to congratulate Daniel on basically having a good sales weekend, and congratulations on his success with the book. I'm sure he's super excited about it, and he from what I've seen online, he's also super appreciative of everybody's support of his work. So just congratulations, man. Okay. Out now. These are some stories that came out this week. Haven't reviewed them, but they are out. Plan to review them in the future, though. That includes The Builder's Pride by J.A. Cipriano. He just put the Legendary Builder Book 2 out not too long ago. So the fact that he has number 3 out, like that's some mad writing skills. So good on you. Also out now is The Sicilian Defense, which is Fayroll Book 5 by A. Levitsky. And then Desert Runner, Patera Online, written by Don Chapman. This is the first LitRPG book, I believe, that she has written, so I'm excited to take a gander at that one. Also out now is Shadow of the Rogue, written by Quinn Dallas. I liked Quinn Dallas's other book, which was sort of erotic fiction, but also LitRPG romance. So I'm going to give this one a shot as well. I don't know if it's different or not, but it is out currently. Also out now is The Black Dragon, Kings of the New World by Dante Doom. And this is from Dante Doom, the author I talked about last week in the review of the first book in the series, who may or may not be a fictional creation of the publisher Relay Publishing. But regardless of that, the book is out now. Also out now is The Dead Fortress, World of Samar Book 3, written by Jared Mendini. And also is Nova Sky, Titan Rising, written by Casey Song. All those are out as ebooks. In audiobooks, we have a couple new, well, actually just the one, no two. We have Forming the Company Alpha World Book 2, out now as an audiobook. And, that's actually, yeah. Everything else is upcoming LitRPG. So, upcoming LitRPG, this is just the list of things coming out in the next couple of weeks and months or so. I'm just going to read them off to you. Not too many new things here, but again, there are a couple. Okay, Perimeter Defense Book 4, A Game with No Rules, is going to be out October the 11th. The Syndicate Slayer, Crystal Crusades Book 2, is going to be on October the 12th. That I don't have a picture for that one, but the author sent me let me know that it is coming out next week. Also, again, on the 15th of October, or just about, Blaze Corbin to the Delvers LOC Book 3 is going to be out. On the 16th of October, Fantasy Online, Pangea by Harmon Cooper is going to be out. On the 16th of October, The Wizard Dungeon Core Book 1 is going to be out. The third book in the Dragon Kings of New World book series is going to be out on October the 20th, called The Iron Dragons. On the 23rd of October, Nemesis. On the 24th of October, it should be The Pantheon Moves, Emerelia Book 10. Don't have artwork for that one, but it is going to be out on the 24th, according to the author. On the 31st of October, going to be Awaken Online Retribution. That should be out then as well. On the 1st of November, Redeemer of the Dead. On November the 8th, Desert Born, which is the Pateria Online Book 2 from Non-Tamman. On the November the 16th, Shattered Lands Book 3. On the December the 4th, The Twilight Obelisk Mirror World Book 4. On December the 29th, Fayroll Mancer, the Pangaea Online Saga Book 2. So there you go. That's it for basically the rest of the year so far. So some interesting things coming up. And I'm sure there's always going to be more things popping up. As if you're a LitRPG author and you plan to put something out at a specific time and you know it's going to be the case, shoot me an email. Happy to put it up for you so everybody can kind of see what's coming up. You can send it to you at feedback@geekbuzz.podcast.com. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, and new releases and reviews. We have, ready to begin with Travail Online. Travail Online Transcend LitRPG Series Book 3. That's the full title, written by Brian Simmons. Okay, it is 388 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. This is the author's description of the story. Travail is collapsing. The terrain is crumbling, the economy is in tatters, and strange mobs are turning innocent people into mutated beasts. Coral wants to rally players and overthrow the CEO behind the game's decline, but there's a catch. He employs her parents in an offshore facility, and he won't guarantee their safe return unless Coral plays nice. Has she picked a boss fight, she just can't win. Meanwhile, Daniel struggles with his mother's gambling addiction, Sybil fights to keep Farah safe from Jack, and Sal keeps eating things he probably shouldn't, all while preparing for their inevitable battle with the Elf Queen at the helm of the game's most torturous continent. Okay, all this stuff is very accurate. I won't try to summarize it again. My overall impression of this novel is that it's good. It's actually better than books 1, and which is better than book 2, or I should say, this is better than book 2, which is better than book 1. Basically, every single novel that the author puts out, Brian Simmons, in this series is better than the last one. So it's always good that the author is improving. And this one has the best story out of the 3 in the series, and a plot that makes 100% sense, at least to me. The writing is really solid, and all the quests connect together. So that is good. It hasn't always been the case for the series, especially in book 1, which was sort of messy plot-wise. Additionally, in this particular novel, there are actually real stakes. In book 1 and book 2, there were sort of stakes in that the characters depended upon the game to earn money so they can make a living in a world that's increasingly run essentially by robots that are taking everyone's jobs. And that's still the case here. That plotline there, but there are actually even bigger stakes for the online world, which is their source of income, but also for their real life selves and the issues they have in real life. And I liked that addition of like real felt stakes. It makes the story more important. It makes what they do in the story feel relevant and interesting, and that it matters. So I did like that. There's also a good reminder that kids shouldn't talk to strangers, even in game, especially when they're super creepy. And this, I mean, the strangers, not the kids. I mean, the kids can be creepy, but that doesn't have any issue with who they should talk to. Additionally, there are some very good crafting scenes and advancement of everyone's skills in the novel. I thought the ether gear in particular was kind of cool. I don't know that I would want to wear it, but I thought it was a really neat addition to the crafting cycle of the series. There was one thing in the novel I thought that was kind of neat and interesting, and at least a little bit different, was the fact that the author essentially makes the game world imperfect. It's in a lot of LitRPG stories, the tech for their VR simulation immersion stuff is perfect. Like there's nothing wrong with it. It's full immersion, full sensory experience, and it's amazing. And that's always nice. But I think this was an interesting way to basically show the game as sort of the villain. And the fact, and in the story, this comes up because server basically server lag and overloaded servers are recognized as a threat to the online rules in this game. And I thought that was a much more relatable problem than other like villains in like previous episodes of the series, like a permanent axe or like hypnotic headsets. I think server lag that ruins your experience in a game or makes it impossible to play, or an overloaded world that has subtle consequences within the game, making it almost unplayable or at least not as profitable for people who depend on it for a living. I think that is a much more relatable problem than this other one. So I thought that was kind of cool. Overall, this is the favorite book in this series for me, at least. And I had a good time. So score of 7 out of 10. So there you go, 7 out of 10. Okay, on to The Lost Continent. AlterGame Book 2, written by Andrew Novak. So, okay. This one is 287 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Full disclosure, I was sent an advance copy a day before release by the translators of the novel, the publishers in English. But I purchased the novel when it came out the very next day. But I just feel I always have to say that as a disclosure. Okay, this is actually quite nice. There's a nice recap at the beginning, I should say, that reminds readers what happened in book 1, so you don't necessarily actually have to have read book 1 to actually jump in on the bandwagon at this point. It is a nice refresher also for everybody who kind of forgot what happened in book 1, like me. Like it's been such a long time between book 1 and book 2 that I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of knew the refresher course. However, my overall review for this novel was kind of the same as it was for book 1, unfortunately. I was definitely more intrigued by what was happening in the real world events in the story than I was with the game ones, which isn't necessarily bad, but I think it says something about the appeal of your RPG game world, unfortunately. And to be honest, I had to kind of take a minute to kind of think and process like why it was the case that I like the real world stuff more than I like the game stuff. And it kind of came from the feeling that the game world is sort of unrelatable, at least for me. The setting of the game world is high fantasy, and things there just sort of seem to always work out for the main character. He, at the very in book 1, he kind of lucked into getting an item that allowed him to have a unique, open up a unique quest line in game. And ever since then, in game at least, it felt like his path was always sort of blessed. Like he always came out on top, even if like things were not going his way initially. Like he always succeeded, and that always just it never felt relatable to me. Especially when you contrasted that to the real world, which was very high stakes in the fact that it's a post-apocalyptic world where like any single tiny mistake will murder somebody permanently. And that to me felt more interesting when death was actually on the line. And in this case, book 2 totally hit somebody. That was more interesting than the kind of low stakes game world, even though like they're related and things that happen in the game world affect the world, and that there's an economy that goes between the two. So the real world was much more interesting to me, and it is the case in this one as well. Again, overall, not a bad story. I'm not saying it's bad. It's bad. It's just if you loved book 1, you'll like this one too. I mean, don't worry about that. I just wasn't one of the people who fell in love with book 1, unfortunately. And I like the real world stuff a lot, especially like the really kick-ass ending. It's just the game stuff wasn't as interesting to me, so it doesn't get as good of a score, unfortunately. It gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our next story. Crisis at Clearwater, a LitRPG virtual fantasy adventure book, book 2 in the Unexplored cycle, I should say. So this is from Alara Branwin. Okay. I will read you the author's description. It is okay. Clint Sawhorn assumed that his increasing proficiency at his job would allow him to get home at a decent hour and would relieve his already too high stress levels. However, his increased efficiency gave his bosses an excuse to add so much more to his workload that he fears for his sanity. To keep him from assessing on his job when he's not there, Clint attempts to escape his reality in the VR MMO of Unexplored. There, in the persona of the heroic and adventurous elf Cleve, he joins with a smart-mouthed kobold named Tarka and a gentle half-giant Krug, the best kind of friend an elf could have, one that would gladly stomp in a jelly anyone intending to hurt his friend or the innocent. On a grand quest to find a powerful ring. Glenn hopes that this light-hearted, swashbuckling adventure will allow him to relax. But when they reach the halfling port city of Clearwater, the fun comes to an end. The citizens of Clearwater face a crisis that threatens to tear the city apart. With the twin problems of his workload and the plight of citizens of Clearwater weighing on him, Clint must muster all of his strength and determination and hope that they, along with his friends, can stop the evil plaguing Clearwater. And just as a warning, this novel has graphic sex scenes. So if that's not your thing, just skip this book entirely because they are super graphic, which we'll talk about a little bit. Okay, it is 358 pages, $2.99 available on Kindle Unlimited. So, price wise, it's a really good deal. Actually, it's about a little more than 50 cents per page. Well, not 50 cents actually. Sorry, 10 cents ish. So it's really on point at least. And this book is kind of a streamlined version of book one in the respect that the novel jumps right into the game. In book one, a good portion of like the novel, the first like 15-20% was just set up, like who the character is, why he's playing this game, what's up with the weird attachments that go with this game that essentially simulate sex. And in this version, it's just bam, first pages in the game. So that's really nice. And it spends the majority of the time in the game. So that's cool. The only time that the story leaves, like the video game, like the game world, is to deal with the real life work problems of Clint, the main character, and that is something that at least breaks up the questing in the game. So that was cool too. In the game, the main character again, his guildmates are going to look for an item called the Ring of Tree Soul that's special to the Ents and Dryads, and that's what the story basically is. As far as like that questing story, it's a series of related quests where they're finding clues to find this ring of power or whatever it's going to be, and they just happen to have a ton of sex along the way. That like regular sex acts, and that's kind of how I break up the story in my brain. Game stuff follows the quest chain, or sex stuff, and there are multiple sex scenes, and while they're relatively a minor percentage of the story, to me they were just such a distraction from the regular fantasy quest stuff, and it was just hard for me to ignore. And so, like, I would be going along quest chain, and then like sex, quest, sex, and there was like huge spikes of like distraction that I would skip over, and I would feel less connected to the story every time I I skipped over the story and got back to the regular, MMO VR looking for the ring kind of stuff. And honestly, the sex stuff I understand is it's totally a part of the story. It's character development, and part of this game mode is the freedom for characters to explore their sexual desires. Um, but if I'm honest, it's just not interesting for me. And I get there's some people who totally love it, and that it's a plus for them. I'm just not one of them, unfortunately. So that was a negative for me, unfortunately. Now, the game mechanics story, they're basically the same as they are in book one. They exist. Characters, bands of power, so it's LitRPG, don't worry about that. However, the game mechanics are rather standard, and they're light still. Health appears as percentages. There are no damage numbers, multiple instances of character sheets, and descriptions, so there's all that good stuff. But the story isn't about the game mechanics. It's about finding a ring and exploring your sexuality, and accepting who you are, and that's all really cool. And overall, actiony. And that's nice. It's just that again, the graphic sex scenes distracted me from the story. And like I said, if you like erotic fiction with your LitRPG, you're going to enjoy the series. This is nice. This is totally your series. Like there's a nice balance. It's not just sex. Like it's interweaving. It all makes sense within the context of the story. However, it's just not that interesting to me, and it takes away from the story for me, unfortunately. And that's just reality. Not every story fits everybody. This is one that doesn't fit me entirely. It's not bad though. I'm just saying the sex stuff draws away from my enjoyment, unfortunately. So I get to score 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, next we have The Girl in the Street, Part 1, written by Anna Iluva. Okay. This one, I'm not going to read the description. It doesn't matter. It's like 20 pages long. It's $2.99. That's right. $2.99 for 20 pages of writing. It is available on Kindle Limited, and it is totally not worth your time. I mean, it's totally not worth your time. I think it was last week or the week before that I also read another series from the same author who tagged her stuff with LitRPG because it was set in a virtual reality game, only there's no game mechanics, and that's the same thing that's happening here. This is just a sex story using the LitRPG tag to kind of trick people into reading it. Within the 20 pages that are there, there's like 4 words that refer to a VR game and nothing related, remotely related to an RPG or even game mechanics of any kind. It's just a long, poorly described sex scene. And so for me, totally not good at all. I mean, it gets a score of 2 out of 10 for me. It's that not enjoyable. It's not even good as like erotic fiction. It's poor quality there, and it's absolutely not LitRPG. And to be honest, I'm not going to review anything from this author anymore. This is not the first time again that I've seen this from this particular author, and it's just it is what it is. But I don't have to give it press. Okay, on to number 5, Starter Zone, The Revelation Chronicles, Book 1, written by Chris Pabesque. Probably saying that wrong, but there you go. Okay, this one is 219 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, when hydrolysis inscribed the consciousness of a human mind onto a single drop of water, a revelation sweeps the land. The wealthy race to upload their minds into self-contained virtual realities nicknamed aquariums. In these containers, people achieve every hope, dream, and desire. But governments wage war for control of the technology. Terrorist attacks cause massive destruction, and the aquariums fail. Inscribed human minds leach into the water cycle, wreaking havoc. Street gangs rule the cities in the 3 years since the fall of civilization, and 16-year-old Cami and her younger sister Albie struggle to survive. Every drop of untreated water puts their lives in peril. Caught and imprisoned by soldiers who plan to sell them into slavery, Cami will do anything to escape and rescue her sister, even if it means leaving the real world for a life in the realms, a new game-like reality created by the hydrologists who for the chosen few. But life in the realms isn't quite as simple as it seems. Magic, combat, gear scorers, quests, and dungeons are all puzzles to be solved as the sisters navigate into their new surroundings, and they encounter a more dangerous enemy than they have ever faced before in the real world. Time to play the game. So that's the author's description of the novel. The description isn't quite accurate in my opinion. The realms are as simple as they seem, but I'll get to that in a second. Okay, and again, 219 pages, $4.90, available on Kindle Unlimited. Slightly more expensive than I would normally pay for a novel, but not outside of the realm of like reasonableness, I guess. It is also available in Kindle Unlimited, so you can get it there as well. And I would suggest if you are going to try it out there. You'll know very quickly whether this is interesting to you. The first third of the novel is actually really cool. I liked it a lot, and it's really great and interesting. This is the post-apocalyptic section that the author is describing. It's post-apocalyptic survival story with a teenager and her sister as the main characters, and water is the enemy, which is, I think, kind of a cool twist. Water that possesses people is a killer instead of zombies or demons, which are more normal, like post-apocalyptic tropes. And I thought it was really cool that the enemy was water, something everybody needs to survive. So I like that fact. Unfortunately, within the first third of it, no game stuff. It's really just setup, character development. This is the world everybody exists in outside of the game, and I thought it was cool, but again, not LitRPG. At the 30% mark of the story, the novel shifts into the game elements, and it turns into this like no risk fantasy MMO, which is a really weird contrast between post-apocalyptic murder water and this almost Narnia-esque MMO. And the MMO stuff it's fun and it's fantasy, but it has some serious logic. And I compare it to Narnia in the respect that the main characters, I won't say how they get there, but they come into this fantasy VR MMO, and their brains are basically uploaded there, so they're stuck there. And the first thing they meet is a giant centaur who's a forest guardian who becomes their friend. And she's level 100, and she takes them to the starter zone and describes things, and then later on, it's a bunch of like little small quest adventures, but there are really no stakes here. And there are also some serious logic issues in the story, which I'll get to. But it reminds me of the respect that Narnia is a fantasy story, and so nobody questions why there's a talking lion walking around, because it's just accepted as part of the fantasy trope. But with an RPG, the readers expect a certain degree of logic to justify why things occur, and so there is that contrast within the three, like, oh, the real world feels very logical, mostly, but the game stuff is there are some issues that we'll get into. Okay, so the game mechanics of the story first, they exist. There are under descriptions with numbers, below the descriptions, even a formula for damage, which is all cool. I appreciate it. However, all that number stuff doesn't matter because in actual combat, in actual practice, there are no numbers. There are no damage numbers, so you don't actually know how much somebody's damaging somebody else. And health is described as a percentage, 30, 40, 50%, whatever the case is. But as a percentage, you don't get an actual number. So all those descriptions about weapon description with their damage ranges are completely meaningless. It's just kind of a conflict of writing decisions. And this writing choice basically says the author didn't really want to deal with all those numbers in actuality, like keeping spreadsheets of formulas or combat logs. And that's fine. That's an author description. It doesn't take away from the story at all. It's just it shows some game logic that you put a bunch of effort into item descriptions with damage numbers, but they never get used, and that's just a decision. The rest of this is going to be a little spoilery, so if you want to skip ahead, totally up to you. It gets I'll give you the score. It's a score of 6 out of 10, and you can go to the next one. But there are a few spoilers, and they're necessary to kind of explain the points. Okay, you've been warned. One serious game logic issue that really super bugged the hell out of me. It happens at the end of the story. The level 3 main character, I won't tell you how, I don't want to spoil like the actual details, but she gets some ultra rare level 60 raid gear. And she can use it with no restrictions, which it kind of blows my brain as far as like a gamer goes. Because there's a reason that items like that have like level restrictions or stat restrictions, whatever the case is so that low-level characters can't get overpowered. And the fact that this exists and that this is given the main character, it doesn't make game logic sense to me. It may make writer sense later on, in the series. But the main character becomes super overpowered. She boosts her stats so much that I think it's equivalent to like 30 or 40 levels of new stats, boosts and powers. And then in addition to that, as soon as she turns in her last quest, she goes from level 3 to level 20 in like a single instant. And again, that also bothers me. And I get more why the author did that second one, because in this particular series, the minimum level to get out of the starter zone, which is what this book is level 20. So for the main character to progress past the starter zone into book 2, she has to at least be level 20. So I get why it was done. I just don't agree that it makes game sense. You know what I mean? And that's what, what somebody like, oh, it's kind of like Narnia, in that if you can accept that not everything's going to make sense, you're going to like the story more than it. It's just that my brain was like, that doesn't make game sense. I've never played a game where this can happen, and I'm like, no. So that's what I'm referring to usually. Again, not all the game stuff is bad. It's not entirely horrid. The most of it is pretty decent, if uninspired. They're cool gamer jokes, realistic gamer social attitudes, just like punk kids who are bugging people. Like some of that stuff is really neat and interesting and accurate. It's just that the logic issue is throughout some of the game stuff, especially at the end. But that lack of logic also continues with regards to the water-based technology used to basically, for some weird reason, justify this game world, and some of the events in the story as well. There's no attempt to explain what the water-based technology actually is. It's just science. It works because of science, because we figured it out. I'm like, I can sort of accept that, but I can't accept that these little water brains essentially are able to infiltrate human minds unless you give me something to kind of justify it. I can kind of accept, okay, there's an unknown computer system with some water instead of, silicon. That's, fine. You're in the future, fine. But to stretch it into like, oh, when these little water personalities get into the water table and people drink them unfiltered, then they can take over the entire human body and the brain. I'm like, that seems a bigger stretch to me. And a lot of that happens here and there. The application of that particular system is inconsistent in places, and especially how the main character and her sister get into the game world. It seems like a serious stretch of logic, and it kind of breaks from the earlier parts of the novel. And I get that the author kind of had to do it to get them into the game and to make it LitRPG, but it almost was like there are two different novels here in a way. Like one post-apocalyptic has this interesting water story. Instead of zombies, it's like possessing water, and that's cool. And then someone decided, oh, this would also be cool to set up as a LitRPG story and kind of mesh the two together, but they feel very different. And so, like I said, it is just interesting. And there are a few quests, and I'm not going to go into that. Also, don't make sense. I'll put in the written review version of it, but basically, like I said, the game version of the game side of this is very much like Narnia. If you can just accept the logic issues as just like, oh, it's a fantasy world, great. I couldn't. And it's not to say that this story is bad by any means, shape or form. It's just that those logic things stopped it from being good for me. And so it gets scored 6 out of 10. There you go. 6 out of 10. Okay, on to let's see. The Laboratory, a futuristic dungeon core, written by Skylar Grant. So reviewed one of his stories last week, maybe the week before, I can't remember. Also has the Dungeon Crawl series, I think it's called. I can't remember. Okay, this one is 226 pages, $3.98, available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Okay. Emma is an artificial intelligence with the love of science, insults, and devilish traps. When her systems are booted up, she finds herself in control of a long abandoned facility in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. The world is filled with dangerous threats granted great power by the same cataclysm that befell the world. Emma must balance safety with a desire for test subjects as she brings herself back fully online and stakes out a place in the world. Okay, so basically this is a dungeon story set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where people have powers gained from cores. So there's like a little bit of a super aspect to it as well. The dungeon can capture them and use research points, basically. The research ability that it has to get new abilities and points to upgrade her dungeon facilities and minions. I can't really say a ton about the story without spoiling it for people, but there are a ton of interesting upgrades, research rewards. I like the story. I really did. It was almost an 8 for me. There are a few points that I'm like, that just kind of kept it from getting like to a great point, but it was definitely really good. And I read it all in one sitting, which says something for me, because I tend to break up my stories, especially ones that are 300 pages, just because I read so many at one time. But this one, like I was up until like 3 in the morning reading it, just trying to like what happened next. It's a really good page turner in my opinion. I had a really good time with it. You can tell when you read this, there are influences from Fallout 4, and from like Fallout. I forget it's like that mobile game for Fallout. There are influences for that as well, and that multiple levels, dungeon cores, kind of stuff. And it was very interesting. I had a really good time with it. Fun to read. Like I said, set through one sitting. The only drawback that some people are going to find from the story is the fact that there is an absolute cliffhanger ending. Like literally, bad stuff is happening, and then bam, end of the story. And the author then says, I had planned for this to be a standalone novel unless like the readers tell me that they want more. So like that is totally that's essentially the author messing with us as readers at this point. Like I said, I had a good time. I purchased it. Go right to the author if you want to read more of this, but it was an enjoyable story. So there you go. Gets a score 7 out of 10. Okay, on to Chronicles of a PC gamer stuck inside of an RPG, book 1, The Duelist. That is one of the longest titles I've ever read. Okay, it is written by Anthony W.F. Chow. Okay, this is a massive 727 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle, but it's so relative to the price. It's priced appropriately. It's priced cheaper than I would normally pay. It's like I think it's 5 cents a page, something 7 cents, whatever it is. But it's it's a pretty good value read. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited, so you can read it there as well. I will read you the author's description. Meet Lawrence Eugene Mulligan. By day, he's a fantasy writer in his mid-30s with a questionable work ethic. He is a hardcore PC gamer who enjoys power leveling his way through one fantasy RPG after another. After one such typical day and night, Lawrence wakes up to find himself in a new world, a fantasy gaming world. Told mainly from Lawrence's perspective, Chronicles follows the adventures of a seriously flawed main character as he seeks to achieve the game's objective, to become king, or else he will spend the rest of his life trapped inside of this gaming world. Along the way, Lawrence will meet NPCs who will either help him or hinder him in his quest. He must carefully choose which persons, factions, and gods to align with. His well-traveled journey will take him from one frontier town on the western end of the continent of Britannia to other parts of the kingdom of Merlin. as well as to other elemental planes. Chronicles is an unusual story with heavy emphasis on the slice of life element, and the book spends about an average of 15 chapters to cover each day of Lawrence's life in the New World. Book 1 follows the protagonist as he learns the way of the sword and becomes a duelist by hapstance rather than by choice. The first book covers only his first week inside of the gaming world. Okay, again, great page count, price 49. There you go. This is absolute slice of life RPG. The main character, Larry, first week, and so it kind of comes out to like 100 pages per day. And so this is a wordy beast of a novel, and that's coming from a very wordy author. Like my stuff, I thought I was wordy, and this one thing is way wordier than I've ever written. Like the first percent of the novel is probably my favorite. This all stuff happens before you shout in the game. It's a section where a middle-aged author, actually middle-aged little RPG author to be specific, is attempting to try to meet his published deadline while trying to resist the temptation of playing his favorite video game, Merlin Mage Supreme. He doesn't win that temptation, by the way. It's a very funny scene, full of self-deprecating humor, and as a writer, I can absolutely tell you that the struggle is real. How to resist playing video games instead of writing. As a self-published author, I'm like, I have to write, and then there's like temptation, video games, temptation, LitRPG, temptation, television, whatever. And so I definitely feel I could relate to it, which would probably I find it funnier than many people will. But that was definitely my favorite part of the novel, and again, that's the first 1%. After that, the novel kind of goes downhill, at least for me. The main character falls asleep. He wakes up to find himself transported into an RPG game world where he assumes he must become the ruler to get transported home. And it is an absolute assumption. There is no basis for this assumption at all. It's just instinct, I think, is the justification that the character makes in there. And from there, it's a slice of life story where the main character plans to rule the kingdom, makes plans rather, to rule the kingdom and level up. He meets a lot of cool people that are going to help him or not. And throughout the story, it's basically him going on those little making plans and doing them, piece by piece, and interesting things happening along the way. And he basically finds out that there are other larger influences who are interested in who becomes king of this kingdom as well, including gods, government officials, factions, royalty, politics, kind of stuff. And that's cool. And the story itself is not bad overall. It is just okay for me. Honestly, there's just a few too many unexplained plot twists. Like something suddenly changes, plot twist. No reason why though. No justification in the story. No logic sense occasionally. And there are two like really big issues that kind of like that way bugged me. One, novel's way too long. And I'm not saying that I was like, oh, this is a bunch of character development stuff. It's just way too long. I'll get to in a second. Second issue is that there are consistent issues of tense where it's distracting. Like the novel tense changes sometimes in mid sentence, and that I know that's going to bother some people like a lot. Like they're going to read a few sentences in this, like in the game, and this mostly happens in the game section when you have multiple perspectives. And the tense is going to change. And I'll give you some examples in a second, but it's going to bother people. So if you're that kind of person, please skip this. It's going to bug you. Okay. Now going back to the length of the novel. Again, as a consumer who likes good value, like deals, I'm like, this is cool. Like 727 pages for $5. I think that's relatively per page a really good price. But this was written on the Royal Road. As a serial, story, and so that kind of explains part of the length issue. And that it's written on each chapter is written over a certain period of time, posted, and you go to the next chapter, and that's fine. I get why it became this long, but you can tell when you're reading it that there's a lot of stuff in the story that just absolutely doesn't need to be there. And I'm not one of those people saying, "Oh, that character development stuff is fluff. Get to the point." No, I'm cool with that. What I'm saying is literally there's stuff here that has no bearing to the story and is just taking up space. For example, at one point, the author takes 7 paragraphs to describe the main character getting up from his seat at a table, walking up some stairs, and opening the door to his room at an inn. 7 paragraphs to describe that sentence. And I'm like, that is just like a perfect example. Like, there's sometimes way too much description and like main character pondering in this novel. And like I feel like it could have a good maybe 20-30% of this novel could have been edited out as like stuff that has no bearing on the actual story or has no effect on it. And again, it happens a lot in the novel. The main character goes off some thought tangent, like spending 5 paragraphs just speculating about a waitress getting him committed and taking all his money. I'm like, there's no basis for logic in there, and it's just speculation on the main character's part, and it could have literally been cut out, and it would have been a more tightly knit story. And again, that's kind of me, or just like scenes that are overly described. So there you go. That's one issue. The other big issue is the regular shifts in tense between in the story, switching between third person past tense and I'm not sure the technical name of it. It's omniscient first person from the main character's point of view. That's the correct term. And this happens mid sentence. I'll give you an example of one of these sentences and how it seems very jarring. Okay, here it is. If Papa knew that she had followed the stupid human home, then Calistro would be aware of how she had purposely driven me into physical exhaustion. And that second me, that last me, I should say, refers to the main character, who isn't actually in this scene. And like he's sleeping in an inn when this scene is occurring, and it's supposed to be taking the perspective of that character, Calistro. And she says, if Papa knew that she had followed the stupid human home, that's her, that character, cat girl. Yet he's referring to driven me into physical exhaustion when the main character is literally in another part of the city sleeping. And so that happens fairly regularly where there's that kind of shift of like, oh, why is the main character speaking like he's here? Is he omnipresent as the narrator? And it doesn't, and like it happens a lot mid sentence, and it's going to drive some people crazy, I have to tell you. So, and again, it happens fairly regularly. So, if you're a person who just has issues like that, great. If you can ignore it, you'll have a good time with the story. But those things are probably the biggest issue of the story for me. There are other small game mechanic issues in the novel or inconsistencies, but those are probably the two big things. Overall, the novel had a really promising start, being funny, interesting, self-deprecating humor, and that potential just kind of peters away. Again, not a bad story, lots of good action stuff. Eventually. And there are some interesting, like small plot scenes, and character relations and dialogue and stuff. I'm saying it's bad in any way, shape, or form. It's just that there are these big things that stop it from being good, and so it gets a score of 6 out of 10. So 6 out of 10. Again, that kind of seems the common score for the episode. Okay, on to number 8, Pangea Online, Book 1, Death and Axes, a LitRPG novel. Written by S.L. Rowland. So there you go. Wait, wrong picture. There you go. Right picture. Okay. It is 255 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Everything has a price. Pangea Online is no different. Easel has spent the past year toiling in the mines of Pangea while the more wealthy traverse its myriad of game worlds. His luck changes forever when he stumbles upon a legendary developer's chest containing an invaluable world pass, which grants him unlimited travel to all the game worlds. Now Easel isn't just stuck watching as others explore Pangea. He can finally level up. But his in-game actions have real-world consequences, and failure online threatens everything he holds dear. Okay, kind of a stretch, but you got to develop some intensity in the description. Okay, again, 255 pages, $3.90, available on Kindle Limited, nicely priced. I'm going to describe it slightly differently. The main character breaks free from his daily grind at the mine as he enters a rare developer's chest that gives him an item heat that lets him travel throughout the multi-universe. He visits fantasy worlds like steampunk, paranormal worlds, and much, much more. And yet, when his friend's mom gets sick, he decides to try and win a big contest that will give him just enough money to pay for her medical treatment. The story contest honestly has a Ready Player One vibe to it, minus the 80s nostalgia. And from about the 30% mark of the story is basically that story of the contest, which is not something that's described in the description, but it's a really big part of the story. So that's why I'm mentioning it to you. That contest is basically a series of riddles that the main character must solve and find the correct world to go to and beat the quests needed to win the big contest. Thankfully, he has a bunch of friends and allies to help along the way. So that is also part of the story. The game mechanics of the story are solid. They exist. They're there. Everybody levels up according to an understand and explicitly stated game mechanic method. Um, and when the game characters level up, they get one stat point, and they can purchase abilities. They have or weapon proficiencies or spell books, or they can find magic items. They give them the same stuff. So there's cool. There's some interesting game mechanic stuff there as well. Um, the combat, however, is free of numbers, and health is given as a percentage. So it's not super crunchy, but there is a bunch of other game mechanic stuff there. Okay, now overall, it's a fun story. It's the relations that develop because the game contests are interesting. The story again has a very heavy vibe of like Ready Player One contest, where like there's a huge prize for all the people who have an opportunity to play it, and people go to different themed worlds to try to find the clues and solve them, and get to the next stage of the contest. And that's probably the biggest theme in the novel. And that's not necessarily bad. I mean, I like Ready Player One. I think it's a cool story. I like that contest has to do it. But it totally kind of spoils the ultimate result of the game of it at the end. If you've ever read that novel, so there are pros and cons to that. It's like I said, entertaining story. Uh, it's hard to say much about the contest without spoiling it. But the main character is interesting, and I did like the fact that he's not doing the contest for himself, but to help his friend who's at the mine. So interesting stuff. Had a good time with it. Not much to say about it besides that. 7 out of 10. So enjoyable. Okay, on to here we go. Last one. Forest, Gaia's Rebirth, Book 1, written by Caden Walker. I do think that thing right there is very interesting. Labeling it as a LitRPG with on the cover, so that's definitely a statement. Okay, this one is 211 pages, 99 cents, available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not sure if that's an introductory price or if it's the permanent price. If it's a permanent price, super good deal. And honestly, the story is totally worth it. I'll read you the author's description of the novel. When Nika's new husband supported her decision to be in the initial beta test of Gaia's Rebirth, she had thought he was being supportive. She was wrong. Now trapped in the game with the two contest-winning beta testers, one that happened to cheat his way in, Nika realizes that there's far more at stake than making her way through a simple beta test. If she doesn't get out of the game soon, her whole life's work will have been for nothing. And that isn't how she wants to honor her father's memory. But her troubles are only just beginning. The people back in the real world have a vested interest in keeping her within Gaia's Rebirth, and they are changing the game to make it happen. That includes closing off her communications with the company and sending massively overpowered monsters to destroy her party in an endless loop of rebooted frustration. The only way out is through. I think through the game, she means. Luckily, there are a few things that the traders don't know about, like the fact that a clever little hacker/thief has managed to place herself within the game, and she might just save them all. For sure, that's next. Okay, so again, 211 pages, 90 cents of Kindle Limited. This is set in the far-flung future of 2070, and the author's description is fairly straightforward. Nika Energy's father created Gaia's Rebirth, the most advanced full immersion game ever. And I kind of like the contrast between what the game represents and what the actual world is described as. In 2070, apparently, the world is crap. Industrialization has displaced nature entirely. There are no more trees. There are no more landscapes of the world unless they're the ultra rich. And so people live in slums, and they live in bad places where they have to, eat processed food, or all the food apparently comes from labs and is grown in labs instead of from the earth. And that is a very interesting contrast between the game world, which is full on nature. Nature is actually taking over civilization in the game world. And I think that was an interesting commentary about the differences between the game and our world. So I kind of like that. But in this game, in the story, it's beta test time. This is supposed to be like a standalone game based on an online world, and so people have familiarity with what the game was kind of like. And which is now this is a little weird. The CEO of the game company volunteers to help with the beta testing, because the guy who was originally slated to be their guide of these two like beta testers mysteriously disappeared. And she doesn't have any issues about like not checking up. So slight issue. But however, once all again, nothing's quite like she expects, and everybody's trapped in the game together. Together, Nika, along with Ash, a hardcore female gamer, and Dean, a noob. The three have to find some way to skip the game, otherwise Nika risks losing her company. Okay. Actually thought this was a very interesting setup for Trapped in the Game, because Trapped in the Game stories are a dime a dozen. Like it's a fairly common way to justify a character being inside of a game for a very long period of time. And this is one of the, I think, the few times that I've ever seen corporate espionage be the reason. And I thought that was very interesting. Um, uh, there's a rival company who has a vested interest in keeping the CEO inside of the game, where she can't stop them from stealing trade secrets, we'll say. And I thought that was kind of neat. Another thing that kind of makes the story really different is the really strong female leads. And I think there are a lot of women who are going to enjoy the story just for that aspect alone, because the ladies in the story are totally cool and they rock. These aren't, in a lot of stories where women are the main characters, oftentimes they're portrayed as just kind of dudes with boobs. And what I mean by that is the fact that the woman's perspective in the game is exactly the same as if she were a guy. Like there's no real difference between what happens to them or how the world treats them. And that is not the case here. Like women here are to me, accurately portrayed in the respect that there are very subtle, sometimes social experiences that each of like the main character women in the story has or is treated to, that realistically portray how women are treated differently than the men in the world. Expectations of being pretty, no matter how successful you are. That guys try to automatically take the lead, even if there's like a more knowledgeable, more qualified woman standing right next to them in the group. Or just the way that women are viewed as sexual objects, by default, by people and by men in the world. And it's not to say this is like some feminist "I hate men" kind of book, but I really did like the fact that there were like these subtle instances of like, yeah, that's how it's like to be a woman. Not that I know personally, but it's like it's things you read about in college or hearing from other women talk to them, amongst themselves, like, oh yeah, that's really an experience. Like you get treated like that. That's really weird because my experience is different as a dude. And I thought that was really well done in this particular novel and story. And again, not only are the women in the story kind of portrayed realistically in that they have unique perspectives on life and they're treated in a very different way than male characters are. And so it reflects an aspect of a realism that isn't always in female led novels, I should say. But women are the heroes here. There are a couple of dudes, but they never take the role of saving the damsel in distress or saving the female characters. That is not a part of the story. Like the women are the heroes. And I thought that was also kind of neat. So there you go. So that those are some cool aspects of the story. Now, I am going to address. There is one comment on Amazon for the story currently as of this recording, and um, the reviewer kind of makes a very interesting point. And I kind of get it. I see the perspective that this person is making. I don't agree with it though, so that's why I'm going to review it. One Amazon review points out that the men are in the story are portrayed as shallow and they're often repugnant. And that he had the impression, or that they had the impression, I don't know if it's a dude or not, that the author had just been dumped and wrote this book to express her negative feeling towards men. Um, and I respectfully disagree with that particular reviewer statement. And I'm addressing this because I thought this was going to be a very common review of the story, just because the women are the heroes in the story. And I'll be honest, the men don't get a ton of backstory, but they're not the heroes. They're not the main characters. And so they really shouldn't get a ton of backstory because they're not the important focus. Yes, some of the dudes are described as repugnant, but those dudes are the bad guys. Like there's a main bad guy who's a total jerk and does some very bad things to get ahead in the world. But he's a bad guy. And so you would expect him to be portrayed that way. And the female villains are portrayed in the exact same way. Like they're willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead in life, including murder, stealing and bad social things, or whatever. And so I expect villains to be portrayed like that. There is a guy in the group who's portrayed as kind of wimpy at the beginning, but he gets better, and that's not because he's a dude; it's because he's a noob. He lied on his application for this contest and said he was a totally well-experienced player who's played over 40, 50 hours in this game, and it was his little brother did that. And so he's a total noob of this world, and he kind of goes through this character arc of like being afraid of pain, being afraid of this full immersion world, um, But once he dies, he basically realizes, oh, that's the worst that's going to happen. And he becomes more and more used to one, much more brave and straightforward. And that's just his character arc. The rest of the dudes in the novel are just portrayed as people. But they're none of them, none of the guys are heroes. They don't ever save the ladies. It's the ladies that make all the progression of the story. There are dudes in the novel and whatever, but it's the women and the heroes. And I think it's that portion of the story that makes some people feel uncomfortable because it's not something you're used to. And so you're seeing the difference in the way that these women are essentially treated as heroes, and that's usually a role for it's mostly for dudes for some reason or whatever. But like I said, it. I just wanted to address it because that's the perspective I see of how the men are portrayed in this novel. They're not treated as they're not portrayed poorly. It's just that they're portrayed differently, and that's not necessarily bad. Okay. The game mechanics of the story, they're decent. Nothing to write home about. When characters level, they get new class abilities, increases in health, mana, damage. Like I said, nothing special there. But the quest and the tactics used to complete to advance the story, you can tell that the author kind of has gaming experience. And this is one of those things that you just kind of have a vibe about. Again, I may be wrong, whatever. But as I'm reading this novel, I'm like, oh yeah, there's like little tiny details, like, oh, this the author's probably a gamer. Like you can tell that there's just ways of solving these game problems that people who aren't gamers don't usually get. And so I do like the fact that even though there's not a ton of game mechanic details in the story, it's like, oh, this is probably written by somebody who actually video games. Okay, overall, the story is pretty straightforward. The first 8% of the novel is completely set up, like setting up the story, character backgrounds, personality traits, things like that. And by the 9% of the mark, 9% mark of the story, you're in the game. So, like the majority of the story takes place within this virtual world. And it's mostly just the characters trying to find a way out of the game after they figure out that the game has been changed to keep them in there. Fresh characters come throughout the story that kind of keep things fresh. And there are a series of revelations in the novel that some people will see coming and some people won't. But like just reading like the first step there, I'm like, oh no, this is gonna go bad. This lady's way too happy. Like whenever you have a main character who just is happy, something bad's gonna happen. Because otherwise the story can't progress. Like most stories rely on a conflict of some kind or another to advance. Otherwise there's no change. So like just seeing a happy main character being like, oh, I feel so bad for this lady because that's not gonna end out well. And I was right. And I was correct, I should say. Okay. Again, the quests are cool. There's a ton of action because that's how in this game people gain experience points from either killing mobs or completing quests, which usually involves killing mobs. But I did like the fact that this novel didn't just have violence as an answer. There were also some situations, actually several, in the novel where violence wasn't used at all, or at least out of the box thinking was used to solve the quest scenarios, which is always kind of cool because just fighting gets boring. One of the things again people may not enjoy about the novel is the fact that it kind of ends on a cliffhanger. Like this is not a I should say it's not there's a resolution sort of at the end, but it leaves a huge wide door open to book two, and you can kind of tell by the end of book one, it's like, oh no, this is like half of the story minimum. Like there's gonna be at least two books in here. It's just kind of how it's set up in the story, but there is kind of a drop off, like dot sort of the into the next story to be continued. And some people are going to complain about it, so just letting you know. Overall, though, I had a good time with it. It gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. Enjoyable. So there you go. And that's it, everybody. All finished. Thank you very much for listening or watching. You can always follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, all kinds of ways, shapes, and forms. And of course, if you want to enjoy the podcast, you can find all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And again, thanks for hanging out with me, for listening to me, gush about LitRPG and the novels that I love and enjoy. And until we can hang out again, folks, ladies and gentlemen, and you can come into my home and participate in this thing. Feel free to leave comments on the show or in the podcast or whatever. I love hearing from you. But until we can again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.